Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. We'll be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first, some of today's top stories. Indoor masks are back. Starting today, everyone in Chicago must wear a mask in indoor public places regardless of vaccination status. So that includes restaurants, stores, gyms, and building common areas. And just announced this afternoon, suburban Cook County will be imposing its own indoor mask mandate. In addition, Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle announces that all county government employees must be fully vaccinated by October 15th in order to return to work. And this comes as COVID cases are on the rise in nearly every part of the state. The Illinois Department of Public Health reports more than 24,000 new COVID cases over the past 7 days, with a test positivity rate of 5.3%, but ranging between 4 and 10% in different regions. The state also announces that more than 77% of adults have received at least one COVID shot. And it's official, former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel is headed to Japan. President Biden today nominated Emanuel to become the next U.S. ambassador to that country. The post is seen as a prominent diplomatic position given Japan's proximity to China. The Illinois State Police announces new measures it hopes will cut down on the amount of shootings happening on area expressways. The agency says today it will install license plate reading cameras on Chicago area expressways to be able to quickly identify offenders that commit gun crimes on the road. The cameras are paid for in part by a $12 million grant. To this date, there have been 157 reported shootings on Chicago area expressways. And that's in 2021 alone. And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Maudlin Ihejirika of the Chicago Sun-Times, Lynn Sweet, also of the Chicago Sun-Times, Sarah Karp of WBEZ, and Mike Flannery of Fox 32 News. Let's get right to it. Mike, masking is back indoors. Will it halt the spread without corresponding capacity restrictions or shutdowns?
I think it's unlikely, but I found it interesting. There was an Emerson College poll done with a local TV station that showed strong support for the masking mandate, but I don't think that that's going to be enough to stop this Delta variant as transmissible as it is.
Lynn Sweet, from your perch in Washington, I mean, is the spread in this latest surge, is it uninhibited at this point? Have we reached a plateau, or is it just continuing to go up?
Well, that's a medical question. And let me just tell you, I could address the politics of this. And that is, as long as cases are increasing, it presents a problem for the Biden administration, just as it does for the Pritzker administration and Mayor Lightfoot's City Hall. So we know from the data we've seen that it is increasing. We know that there's an order for the booster shot. So, Paris, I would say that it is a political problem as long as it is increasing and the trajectory is up, not down.
Well, Lynn, though, is it a political problem for some of these governors in states like Florida or Texas or Louisiana where hospitalizations are 100%?
But we've seen some court cases and some actions from local units of government who want to have masking mandates. I don't know if, especially in the states of Texas and Florida, where we kind of I take as a weather vane of resistance, and what happens there is a barometer of the most extreme cases of resistance to masking. And so far, it seems that these governors are not in any danger of being toppled at the moment. So I would say it's too soon to say that impact. Now, certainly, if I could bring this home to Illinois, we know that two of the Republicans who would like to replace J.B. Pritzker are using how he is handling COVID and the resurgence as part of their brief against him. I think, though, in Illinois, which has had its divisions, especially among Republicans when it comes to masks and mandates, that I don't see how it is permanently hurt.
And the two challengers you're talking about, Gary Rabine and downstate Darren Bailey. Maudlin Ihejirika, you wrote this week about an experience you had going to the doctor for a procedure when you asked a nurse whether they were vaccinated. What happened?
The medical tech, actually.
Medical tech.
Yes, a personnel who performs radiology type tests, was chatting away animatedly, inches from my face. And we were both chatting, and I was engaged in her small talk, and we were both lamenting about the resurgence. And something about the way she responded when I was talking about the unvaccinated made me say, "Can I ask if you're vaccinated?" She said, "No, I'm not." Now, she was this far from my face. And I said, "Why?" And she said, "It's just my choice." And I suddenly wanted her as far away from me as possible. And the only way I could describe the rest of that test was hell.
And you wrote about this, you got a lot of feedback, and then that hospital system instituted mandatory vaccination. Maudlin, what was the feedback you got, both from the public and that system?
Well, you know, it's interesting because the vaccine issue is so front and center. It really hit a nerve. I didn't realize how much people are vested in the issue on both sides. And so, yes, the very same day that my column ran, North Shore called me personally to tell me that they were instituting the new vaccine mandate that very same day. And so that was good. But of course, Northwestern Medicine and Amita Health are still the only two holdouts. And the inbox was flooded by people saying they had no idea that they had to worry about the vaccine status of the medical personnel treating them, be it medical tech, nurse, or doctor, when they go to the hospital.
Most healthcare systems in the area, but those two that you mentioned instituting these vaccine mandates. Sarah Karp, you reported on a disparity in teen vaccinations throughout Chicago. What did you find?
So we looked at the whole 6-county region, and what we found, not terribly, surprisingly, the teen vaccination rates sort of mirror what the adult vaccination rates are. So where there's low adult vaccination rates, there's also low teen vaccination rates. But you see wide disparity. For example, you see in places like Oak Park and Lisle, almost all of the 12 to 17-year-olds who could get vaccinated got vaccinated. And then you see in places like Dalton or Inglewood in the city, you see like less than 25%. So it's a wide swing.
Is there, and are there reasons given for this wide swing in certain areas?
You know, it's the same reason as adults, and a lot of teens that I talked to said, "I'm listening to my mom. If my mom said I needed to get the vaccine, I'd go get the vaccine." And you know, there are a lot of social media messages that the kids brought up, like, you know, maybe there's going to be a chip put in you, or maybe, you know, maybe your fertility is going to be threatened in, 20 years or something. But at the same time, you know, when I asked them, well, was your mom vaccinated? It correlated very much with whether they were vaccinated. So obviously that's the person that's having a lot of influence, and you need your mom to take you to get vaccinated. So if your mom doesn't believe in it, then you're not going to go, or your dad.
Another potential person that can have influence is your local priest or a religious figure if you're a person of faith. And this week, Cardinal Blaise Cupich wrote a letter to priests saying, don't tell parishioners there's any kind of Catholic exemption to getting the vaccine. In fact, it's Catholic to get the vaccine. Mike Flannery, what did you make of what the Cardinal did?
Well, it's similar to what Pope Francis has been saying in the Vatican, that it's an act of Christian love and concern for our fellow human beings around the planet to get the vaccine. But how much influence that has, I really don't think that that's a major factor. It may well be. I suspect that what Sarah has found, the racial disparities, might well be present in the Catholic Church too. Certainly, my guess is that among white, college-educated Roman Catholics, 90% plus, maybe 95, 98% plus are vaccinated. Among Hispanics, much, much lower, perhaps.
All right, well, as this is going on, the Chicago Teachers Union is in a standoff once again with Chicago Public Schools over COVID-19 metrics. CTU President Jesse Sharkey talked about some of his concerns this week. Take a look.
There's a vaccine that's available for students that are age 12 and older. Among Black students in Chicago, for example, only 12% of those students are vaccinated.
All right, Sarah, this goes back to the point you were making. Another thing I hear from CTU is they don't see a plan from CPS to close down schools if there is a COVID outbreak. Do you see any kind of plan like that CPS is working on?
No, I think that CPS has said maybe they would shut down. There's been some movement, I think, over the last 2 days on this idea of like when they would shut down if there was a surge. But pretty much what the school district is saying is that if the governor shuts down schools, we'll shut down. But otherwise, we do not want to shut down. The head of the Chicago Public Health Department has said schools are safe. Schools are a controlled environment. And we've seen in other places of the nation where they've opened up schools and had in-person learning that it was safe. And, really, they just do not want to go back to in-person learning as a district at all costs, really. I feel like we don't know all the metrics, but I think when the officials look at what's happened to the student body under remote learning, I think they're just like, we're not going back there if we can help it.
So do you yeah, go ahead, Mike.
If I could just jump in, I mean, we don't have to take a look at other school systems in remote parts of the country. The Catholic Archdiocese had the schools open last year, and across the street from me at that time, St. Barnabas had hundreds of kids and teachers in there. It went very well.
Right. So you see, I mean, that's sort of the point of the school district. But the teachers union isn't buying it. They want a metrics. They want to know if it's above a certain point, the district will shut down.
And I got to say, at Chicago Tonight, we reported on a few Catholic school teachers and administrators that didn't feel that the Archdiocese was doing the right thing, keeping schools open, and they felt that they weren't getting all the information on COVID within their schools that they needed. But overall, you didn't hear a large volume of complaints. So let's move on to some political news. Lynn, this week in Springfield, the Democrats had their annual Democratic breakfast before Democrat Day at the State Fair, although Governor J.B. Pritzker was not at that breakfast run by the Democratic Party and Chairman Robin Kelly. Do we read anything into that rift or not?
No, it's not a rift. I think you're overplaying it. I respectfully say it was a function.
I meant to say, do we read anything into that absence? Not rift was the wrong word.
And actually, because it wasn't a state party event, it was the Democratic chair, I believe, event. But in any case,
the county chairs, county chairman.
So this isn't a Robin Kelly event. So that's number one. Number two, okay, the original planning for that event was to have it inside, and Governor Pritzker wasn't going to go inside a big event in a hotel. It was moved outside. So his people said to other reporters and to me, he had plans with his family, and he didn't want to change them. He had been at the state fair for days and days before that. I know he was on the other side of the divide when it came to the Robin Kelly election. He was for Chicago Alderman Michelle Harris. And it was really over issues dealing with her ability to fundraise because she's a federal official. He is going to let it see how it plays out. And it's not a rift. It is reasonable questions he had if she was the best one because of her federal post. I think his coming or not coming in the end is making more to do with it than not. We'll see if now, by the way, so our listeners know, Robin Kelly did create a committee to deal with the fundraising that she can't do and make decisions about hiring and firing. If it turns out to be a bad idea, this experiment, she's up for re-election as party chair within a year. She was just taking
Mike Madigan's place.
An expired term.
So the issue here is whether she can fundraise for the party, which she can't, so she put together a committee that will do that separate from her. Marlon Hijerica, other political news, Democrats are going to go back to Springfield later this month to redraw the congressional maps now that the census numbers are out. One congressional district is going to go away. What do you think that's going to look like?
I think that with the Democrats in control, we're going to see definitely a Republican district floated. I mean, that's a no-brainer. But I think that you're going to see definitely greater debate over the issue in the light of the numbers that show the new racial breakdowns. And so you're going to definitely see the Latino caucus advocating for a greater share. And so who knows how it's going to all play out. I think there's going to be a lot of compromises called.
And that of course, reflects the growth in the Latino population in Chicago. Go ahead, Lynn.
But the growth is, right now, under the Civil Rights Act, we have 3 districts that were created to design to elect a black member of Congress, and 1 where you had to attach the 2 areas in the city where you have consolidated Hispanic population, Pilsen and Pilsen on the south and the Humboldt Park area on the north side. So there, even though Hispanic population has increased, it hasn't increased in enough area to create likely a second Hispanic district. Now, on the sometimes political show I do with Laura Washington that we did last night, we had on Congressman Garcia as a guest, and he wasn't ready to concede the point that you couldn't make a second congressional district, but it's highly, highly unlikely. Look for the changes more in the ward and legislative levels to reflect the population.
In the ward levels, that'll certainly be a fierce debate over black and Latino represented wards in Chicago. Mike Flannery, going back to those congressional maps, a downstate Republican Congressman Rodney Davis seems to think that Democrats are going to come after him, draw a district that's going to make it harder for him to win. Do you think that's going to be the case?
Well, there's a lot of debate about that, and does J.B. Pritzker want to perhaps put, by writing by eliminating Davis's district or making it a district that he doesn't want to run in, he says he's going to then jump into the governor's race. He's arguably I think, the strongest Republican candidate for governor. I know there's a lot of disagreement in the Republican Party about that. My guess is that J.B. Pritzker would prefer not to have Rodney Davis jump in. So, we'll see what they do. I think Adam Kinzinger is a guy who's on the bubble. I know that even Democrats who are sympathetic to...
You don't think that Pritzker wouldn't want to face him, though, do you? I mean, he would be a formidable candidate, at least as formidable as Davis.
Well, I'm of the school that he's got a heck of a dogfight, Kinzinger does, in the Republican primary in any event.
Well, that's true. That's true.
And I can tell you that a top-ranking, a very, very high-ranking Democrat in Springfield is convinced that Kinzinger is going to lose whatever Republican primary he would face.
Yes.
And so then they're thinking, let's go ahead and just grab that district. So there's a lot that's up for grabs, but. Yes. We were talking about Robin Kelly. If you're looking, her district in the wards on the south side that are in her district, the depopulation there has been breathtaking. That once again the black population in the city has dropped by another 10%. We have about 500,000 fewer African American residents in Chicago than we did when Harold Washington was mayor, and I think to maintain 3 districts in which black candidates are certain to win, I don't think it's possible anymore.
All right, well, we need to move on to some of the other news of the week. CPD officer Ella French was laid to rest. Listen to what Cardinal Blaise Cupich said at her service.
Yes, let us grieve together for Ella, but also for all those she cared about. For the children, young and old, cut down by gunfire every day on our streets.
It's a very, very emotional service. And Sarah Karp, I mean, this comes as a new poll comes out showing that the CPD has 70% approval while they feel, that the city doesn't have their back. What do you make of, the state of police community relations, the state of police morale right now?
Well, it was very interesting to see the police react to Mayor Lightfoot over the last 2 weeks since Ella French was killed. It also was interesting to hear what the father of Ella French's partner said, that they really just don't feel supported, and they feel like sort of her listening to the defund police people has hurt the police. But I also think that the kind of nice thing about the way this story has played out is that people have brought up that she really cared about the community, and she was really saddened about all the gun violence in the city, and that, it's such a difficult thing that the police are confronting, and that they also know that there are good police out there who are very sensitive to the people who are out there struggling and really suffering from the gun violence.
And at the same time, there were a group of activists that called out CPD for apparently renewing its contract with ShotSpotter, that technology that's supposed to detect gunshots and then dispatch officers. Maudlin, was that contract renewed with the city? Do we know that 100%?
We don't know that 100%. That is what is being reported, and we have yet to hear from the city confirming the contract or the extent or changes to the contract at this time. I think that the Ella French funeral really her killing, first of all, really brought the city together and showed that everyone, of every race and creed is impacted every time and any time a police officer lays their life or gives their life on the line to keep us safe. I think that one thing, though, we have to keep in mind is that, as the insults and being hurled against Lightfoot for, being open to police reform, we really have to keep in mind that, no one incident defines this debate. And we just all really have to pray for our police officers as they execute their jobs in the line of duty, and pray for our citizens as they drive to and fro. We certainly hope that justice will be served in the case of the perpetrators, and no one wants to see this perpetrator. I'm sorry.
Understandable. It's a horribly emotional situation for so many people involved. Lynn, I want to move on to something you reported on this week with the Obama Center. Another legal challenge was filed by Protect Our Parks, and just today the Supreme Court declined to hear the case that they wanted to bring. Is that it? The backhoes are going to start digging the dirt at this point?
Well, thank you for letting me just give you the update on it. There is a court case that will continue. Amy Coney Barrett, the newest member of the Supreme Court, who handles emergency matters for for Illinois, didn't want to weigh in and suggest or recommend an injunction to stop the work that started on Monday. So the heavy equipment is in Jackson Park. Construction is starting. It will take about 4 years to build. The underlying court case, which is a second try by the opponents of locating the Obama Center in Jackson Park. That case is still there for now, but at the same time, the construction work has begun.
And you reported on some high dollar donors that the foundation got recently, including old number 23, correct?
It's Michael Jordan and his family. So if you're curious as to all the bigger donors, they do have a list. That in this newest round, the two names that stuck out at me was, of course, Michael Jordan. Some corporate heads decided to put in more than $1 million. Jordan's in for more than $1 million. They don't release the specific amount of the pledge. And then the Open Society Foundations, which is run by George Soros, who's a pretty well-known mega Democratic interest donor.
All right, and before we go tonight, and this is going to be talked about on Washington Week, I'm sure a lot right after us, but Mike Flannery, Afghanistan and the evacuation of Americans and Afghan allies has been all over the news all day. Speaking of political damage, how much of a political hit has President Biden taken, given everything that's happened over the last 6 days?
I think he's taken a heavy hit this week. I do think, though, that in the long run, the voter opinion surveys haven't wavered in finding that large supermajorities of Americans want us to get the heck out of there. The president, when he spoke this afternoon, said, if Osama bin Laden had not sought refuge in Afghanistan, would we have ever sent a single soldier there? Of course not. And to be there still 20 years later, doesn't make strategic sense for the U.S. Switching, focusing on China. The reference you made about Rahm's new job in Japan being right next to China. That's where American national interests are in that part in Asia. Focused on China, focused on that part of the Indo-Pacific region, not in Afghanistan.
Certainly taking a hit this week for the way the pullout was done. But as you mentioned, attention spans are short. News cycles move on really quick, and I think a lot is going to be contingent on how the evacuation goes from here on out. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so our thanks to Maudalini Edgerica, Lynn Sweet, Sarah Karp, and Mike Flannery. And that is our show for this Friday night. Don't forget, you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And be sure to join us tomorrow night at 6 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, and then 6 o'clock Sunday for Chicago Tonight Black Voices. And we're back at 7 o'clock all next week. And now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe. Enjoy that great weather this weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm named on the